dozens of ambulances at this point just lined up from all over, just in a line waiting for victims. I haven't personally seen any of the victims being brought to the ambulances, but again, police backed us away from the Boylston Street area, so we weren't even allowed to go anywhere near Boylston Street by the time we started walking over there. But this is just confusion here. People are trying to find their loved ones. They're trying to get away from the
sad day in the city of Boston. We'll pause here just briefly to welcome more viewers to our coverage.
Or how to find their loved ones. Some of them don't have cell phones.
And for those just joining us, Brian Williams here in New York, but all eyes are on the situation in Boston. This was the live television picture showing what we now know to be the first of two explosions. In the center of your screen, you see a runner go down after getting hit by a piece of shrapnel. You see the smoke plume rise no less than 50 yards from the finish line, and then a second explosion seconds later, just a short distance down the street, appears to be equidistant from the route of the race. Both explosions appear to have been located at or near the base of buildings at the finish line of the Boston Marathon this afternoon on Patriots Day, about an hour after the first highest-ranking elite finishers. And sadly, the injuries we are hearing about being triaged and taken to hospitals are consistent with what you would find in similar explosions in a war zone. We're choosing not to report any numbers early on because there's going to be great confusion with several metropolitan hospitals getting the wounded from this. If there's any good news to report at all, and it's a double-edged sword because they were likely among the wounded, you had public safety officials right there. The medical tent was within view of the first explosion. You had Boston PD, fire, EMS, all there on duty because of the secured finish line. These were initial aerials from our station, WHDH in Boston. Right there at the top of your screen, you see the white powder, aftermath of an explosion. That was what's left of the reviewing stand. The black truck's part of Boston PD as they investigate. The feds were en route. And you see the aftermath from an explosion on that sidewalk. No other way to put it. Windows were blown out, flags were blown down. You saw the barricade came down, and runners who were just yards from, for several of them, accomplishing the greatest feat of their lifetime, one of the great athletic achievements there is, 26.2 miles in the famed Boston Marathon, one of the most famous public sporting events in this country, and instead knocked off their feet by one of two concussive explosions at the finish line. Way too early to draw any conclusions. This is just into us. Three separate law enforcement officials are looking very closely at the possibility that this is, to use military parlance again, an improvised explosive device, an IED, that this could have been a bag or satchel, that this somehow eluded race day security, whether it was pre-positioned or came in during the excitement of the finish and escaped the attention of sniffer dogs and electronics. Let's listen in once again to WHDH.
We don't really know because this all happened close to the medical tent, and as you know, they have those foil wraps. Another ambulance pulling in right now, anticipating yet another person here. The people here at Boston Medical Center don't have a firm count, an official count, because people are still coming in. So they haven't come down to give us much information. We've only been able to glean from what we can see outside here. I have to admit, just a couple of minutes ago, there was a very, it looked like a very heart-wrenching scene. A mother and a couple of other young women came running out of the hospital. They jumped into a car. I asked them if they lost someone or if they had someone in that explosion, and she said, yes, my daughter, we're trying to find her. So apparently they're going from hospital to hospital to see. Someone else is coming in right now. You see someone going in on a stretcher. He is sitting up. Again, we don't know if this is an individual from the who was watching the marathon. However, he just did come in an ambulance, and he went in the same door that the other victims, who clearly were from the marathon, went in. But inside the hospital, we've been told that it's quite chaotic inside. A lot of nurses and hospital personnel who are off today have been called in to help out, and we understand also a description from someone who was inside and talking to some of the staff here said that there are a number of people here with very severe injuries. So that's the scene here at the Boston Medical Center, again, where the ambulances, you can hear the ambulances coming and going. We, again, with our own eyes, have seen at least 6 people come in here, possibly 7. Again, people with the foil wrapped around them, people laying on stretchers going in here. The situation inside described as mayhem and quite chaotic inside the hospital as well. That's the latest live from Boston Medical Center. I'm Byron Barnett.
So that's live coverage that our viewers in Boston are receiving from WHDH. Just a terrible day, and what should have been just a magnificent day for the city of Boston, the annual running of the Boston Marathon. Mike Gleason, with apologies. Mike Gleason's an NYPD veteran who was just a spectator today, had a member of the family running in the race. And Mike, I guess since you saw this, do you have any reason to add anything to the descriptions thus far? We are now able to see it as recorded by live TV cameras, but did your trained eyes catch anything? Did you detect anything amiss?
No, it just everything was normal. Everyone was relaxed and happy and joyous. Everyone was drinking their water and wrapping themselves in foil, and then an explosion right next to the finish line, and then within another maybe 30 seconds, another explosion, and then pandemonium struck.
I mean, I don't know if you heard me saying, and I hate to say this, but this is how it's done overseas. An initial and a secondary, just as people are rushing toward the wounded from the initial explosion.
And my worst concern, Brian, was we had my 2 children, my friend's 2 children. We put them into a Sprint store. They were kind enough to let us in there. And then once we were able to get moving, we wanted to get away from any area where there was a high concentration of people.
Yeah, it's sad to say, but people who have any exposure to military or law enforcement are often prompted to get out of there instead of doing what is human nature and rushing in to help, only because of the risk of a secondary explosion in this cruel era of such things. But it looks like there you have, that's again the best picture right there, the powder burns against the side of the building, and then again the reviewing stand. Mike Gleason, thank you very much. We have the first facts from this from the Boston Police Department, and this is pretty grim. Boston PD is reporting by Twitter 2 dead, 22 injured. And again, 23 now, 2 dead, 23 injured. Again, we know from eyewitness reports, from what we've heard on our Boston station, some of these injuries are grievous injuries consistent with what happens when an explosion goes off in a tight urban area. Look at the facade of that building. You had people between that building and the police barricades, and then you set off an explosion, and this is what's going to happen. Flags, banners gave way. People were hit, and look at human nature. Run toward the explosion. That's right when the second one went off in the space of about 15 to 20 seconds. Of course, a lot of these people, not only is it their job, it's their reflex. These are public safety officials. These are race volunteers. A saving grace, most of the police officers you see with the bright green vests are also in this day and age wearing Kevlar vests. So let's hope that there are Boston PD members who were able to survive this and help by dint of that. But it's something to think about. Maybe it made the difference in a few cases. This is Patriots Day in the city of Boston, commemorating Lexington and Concord. This was the day of a Red Sox game. Fenway Park is about 1.5 miles away from this. The closest intersection, what we're talking about here, is Boylston and Dartmouth. In Boston, we had a picture across the Charles River showing the smoke plume from these dual explosions. Again, no one has said anything official. It will take forensic testing of the residue from the explosion, but there are certain accelerants and certain explosives that will immediately tell investigators this was not a gas main. This was not a kind of naturally occurring explosion from the systems contained in a large American city. This was an explosive that was put there to do harm. We don't know that yet. It is just quite a coincidence otherwise that we have two concussive impacts here on the finish line of the Boston Marathon. Again, the aerial pictures from our NBC station, WTMJ-TV in Boston, where they will continue live coverage. All shifts have been called to work, goes without saying. Boston PD. Let's listen in to some of the eyewitness reports our station's getting.
I don't think they could even comprehend what's happened here. People reported hearing 2 explosions a short time ago near the finish line. I think we've already established that, but you can just see the emotion
I've been corrected.
on
This is the audio that goes with these initial aerial pictures. So this is part of the early live reporting. Let's see if we can't switch channels and dip into what WHDH is saying right now. Can we do that?
Still trying to find his wife, who often waits for him at the finish line. I also ran into a man. He was covered with a blood-stained shirt. And I stopped him and I asked him if he was okay, and he just said, "I'm a doctor," and proceeded onto the scene. There was a line of dozens of wheelchairs from the medical team making their way over still to the finish line. We're still trying to figure out and get more details, but as you walk the area here in the Back Bay, you just see so many runners still wrapped